You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. You know, it's not often that we could say that our guest flew in from the Academy Awards just to be here with us this morning. But Greg Gorman, you did just that, and I tell you, we're pretty flattered by that. That's pretty impressive. It's great. Greg.
It's all good. I'm happy to be here.
For those of you who don't know, shame on you, but Greg is one of the premier portrait photographers. He's won the Lifetime Achievement Award in Portraiture from the Professional Photographers of America. He's photographed anybody who's worth photographing in Hollywood and elsewhere, a lot of who's who. And not only that, you've been around for a while, unlike many photographers that we speak to. You've been here. You've seen it from film right through digital and everything else, and you're still working. Welcome to our show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what's new? No.
What's new? Now, that's a question that will stump me. Not much is new, but...
I have a question, because you're talking about going from film to digital. Earlier you mentioned going from strobe to LEDs. And here we're talking portrait photography, and you said you're all LED now, and you want to talk a little bit about that switch and,
sure,
and how that worked for you?
I think a lot of it boils down to you just get kind of bored with what you're doing. I spent most of my career in the studio. Now I like shooting more natural light or continuous light. And for years when I started shooting continuous light, I was working with a light that back in the day when I was earning a living cost me $30,000. It was an Arri 6K HMI with a ballast was $30,000 with a stand and the whole shebang.
Right.
But that quality of that beautiful continuous light was great. And now today with the LEDs, you have a continuous light source that's easily adjustable in terms of color temperature and power. And with having to use higher ISOs, I find that the pictures look more like film rather than the precision that digital often gives you.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, and I thought that was a pretty interesting. You said you often are shooting portraits at ISO 3200.
Most of the time.
And it gives you that look of film. I think that's a great point.
I mean, I think when I started shooting with Canon before I switched over to Sony, I was almost always shooting at 640 because that interpolation gave me something that at least bumped it up and took it away from. I noticed and realized actually in editing my newest book, going back to my 160 boxes that were in cold storage where I probably belong.
We want to talk about that for sure.
That film was never that precise, you know, and digital, when you look at the difference, I mean, there's a charm and a quality that film offers that digital never did. Digital is all I shoot now. I've embraced it, and it's extraordinary. But when you go back and look at the real deal, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to that topic of the book and going back and editing your work. But Colin, while we're on the lighting aspect here, you mentioned, did you prefer continuous light? Is that kind of a stylistic choice that you made going back to the early parts of your career, or was it something that you just said, you know what, it's just easier, it's better, let's just
I don't even know that it's easier, but I tell you, one of the things that continuous light offers that flash doesn't is it fills in the gaps. You don't miss that intermediary step. You don't have that abrupt change with a flash. I find that there's a certain spontaneity that you capture with continuous light that you'll never get with strobe.
That's a good point. And do the subjects tend to react better? I mean, is there anything you can talk to about that aspect of it?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, obviously with LEDs they're bright. And so that's oftentimes you hear a little bit of complaining that the lights are kind of bright. And then I bump the lights up even more, bump up the ISO, I should say, even more, and have to dim the lights down a bit. So that's occasionally a complaint, but
can I ask you a question on that line?
Sure.
You were using HMIs for a long time, you said.
Yeah.
And those are extremely bright. That's
yes and no. Not when you put them through a silk. I mean, I put it through a silk. It's not quite as bad. Maybe it is. Maybe you're right. You may be right. It is. They're pretty bright.
I always look at it like an HMI compared to, especially the earlier LED units. It was like comparing a solid fuel rocket to a helium balloon.
Yeah. Well, the original LED lights were like lighting a matchstick. It was like a Stanley Kubrick film. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. At what point did LEDs make the grade for you? Because again, it's been gradual, and now again, you really can pack a lot of brightness into a small unit. At what point did you say, okay, I could work with these, I don't need my strobes?
When I first found my relationship with Rhodolite, I was actually up in Toronto at a competitor's camera store, and I went up to the film floor and I said, show me what you have in continuous light. And I really, really liked what Rhodolite was putting together, and they're putting out a light that is going to be in big competition with the Arri Sky panel called the Titan. It's extraordinary light.
following up on Alan's question a little bit about the controls that you could get from LEDs. Did they take a certain leap at any one point? I mean, is there something
in
with
color
the
balance for sure? I mean, I think when you saw a lot of the earlier LEDs, and of course, being a portrait photographer, I don't shoot anything that can't talk back to me. So skin tone's everything for me, and I think that the ability to adjust the color balance with the road lights has been fantastic. And they were one of the first ones that really got the color temperatures right.
So you want to just repeat that line, which was a great line?
No, I said, as a portrait photographer, I never shoot anything that can't talk back to me. I could never.
When's the first time you used that line? That's what I want to know.
A long time ago. When I used to shoot a lot of advertising campaigns, I personally would hire a great tabletop photographer to do any of the still life stuff because I didn't have the patience or the wherewithal to have to deal with it.
Oh, that's interesting. And do you think it's kind of a matter of patience or lacking?
It's a matter of what you like. I don't think you're good at anything you're not passionate about. And I mean, I rarely, people are always amazed. I rarely carry a camera with me. I rarely have any interest in taking pictures. I see pictures when I'm out and I go, oh, I wish I had a picture of that. And of course, now the iPhones are better. But I rarely have a camera with me because I'm a person that I can go somewhere to another city and within the parameters of visiting, I'll shoot something, but it has to be a person in the frame. And it usually has to be something that I schedule or put together or organize.
And has it always been that way? I mean, were you ever the kind of guy that carried your 35 millimeter around and just?
No,
did
I was a
street
hippie
shots?
and smoked dope and was shooting rock and roll concerts. But beyond that, I never did.
All right. And is there anything wrong with what you just described?
No, it was kind of fun back then. It was a lot more carefree and easier. Rock and roll was really what got me started. I mean, that's the first time I picked up a camera. So that was a big part at the beginning of my career.
What got you into it? What was the first time you picked up a camera and said, this is what I'm doing?
Well, I borrowed a friend's camera to shoot a Jimi Hendrix concert in Kansas City in 1968. And the following morning, I went to his house and we processed the pictures in his darkroom, a little 11 by 14 trays with Deckdoll and all that stuff. The developers and D76 did the whole deal. And when the pictures were coming up in the tray on this white piece of paper, I was pretty well hooked. The pictures were, since we're talking about drugs, the picture was a little bit out of focus. And I don't know if it was because I shot at a 60th of a second or I'd smoked too much pot that night.
Or both.
Probably a combo.
The reason why I say is because I photographed Hendrix in 1969 at Lincoln Center.
Wow.
Ansco 640. And yes, it's very grainy and out of focus and everything else was going on, like you're saying.
Exactly.
So Jimi Hendrix inspired a lot of photography here. Was that because it was Jimi Hendrix, or you just wanted to get to a concert and start shooting? Or
well, it was the early days. I mean, he was one of the first, when the concerts were kind of starting out, that was one of the first heavy headliners. And to this day, he still remains pretty legendary.
Sure. And you can actually step up to the stage with a camera back then.
Yep, you could. Well, I shot him from my seat with a 50 millimeter lens.
Oh, okay.
But I was third row center, so they were pretty good seats.
And are you from Kansas City? Is that home?
I am from Kansas City.
Oh, that's great.
I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, but actually grew up in Kansas. But for those of you that don't know, there's a street down the middle of the city called State Line, and one side is Kansas and the other side's Missouri.
Looking through your work, it was kind of a real cross-section. Just Google your name and you get everything from all the different times. And it just seems that your work, your portraiture, is 50-50 color and black and white when you look at all of it. Do you have a preference for monochrome or color?
Well, it's ironic that you should say that. I mean, all my books until... I did my last book that was published was a book of male portraits and nudes, and that was my first time I ever published color. The new book obviously probably is going to be a mixture of my whole career, 50 years of pictures, and about half of it is color. Do I have a preference? I love black and white.
Okay.
But I thought it was time to publish some of my color imagery.
Now, when you shoot, I mean, is it safe to assume you're shooting raw and you have the choice to go mono or color?
Yes, but of course I shoot color. I mean, I think the people today that are shooting black and white are the people that never learned how to take a picture. So they shoot in black and white because they don't know what they're getting. When you learn color and you learn tonal values, you know what the colors are going to be in black and white.
That's an interesting statement. I don't know if I agree with you 100% on that.
Oh, come on.
It's an interesting.
You know what shades of red look like in black and white, depending on the intensity and the tonal.
No argument. But again, looking at an image that's rendered in monochrome just has a different impact than color. And again, I love color. I see color all over the place, and I constantly shoot it. But I quite often will take my color images and I'll knock them to monochrome, see if they still hold up.
That's a valid point. I think that. One of the big issues I had when I was editing this book was, of course, as a photographer, your style evolves throughout time.
Sure.
And also, as a photographer of personalities, I chastised myself tremendously in going back over a lot of my early images because they were so overlit. They all looked like interchangeable postage stamps. And I was so pissed that I didn't practice what I preach and take the light a little bit off the center focal point of the camera. And that's a valid point for shooting, as you said, in monochrome, to look at the pictures, because sometimes the tonal values in color, if they're too similar, give you a pretty dead black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And moving the light off the center, as you described, how did your style evolve at that point?
I started shooting fairly early on when I was working for Interview Magazine, shooting a lot of spot grid, very directional light. And that's when I realized by taking the light a little bit off the center focal point of the camera and creating a greater dynamic range between my highlights and my shadows, that the pictures answered less questions and left more to the imagination.
Can we talk a little bit about the difference between shooting, let's say, a celebrity portrait and a fine art nude? How do you approach your subject at that point? I mean, what's the interaction level? How much more direction are you giving the fine art model in terms of body placement, and how do you interact with the celebrity, let's say?
All right. I mean, and you could also apply this just as well from a fine art nude versus even shooting fashion. In terms of the realm of shooting a celebrity, they're not being paid for you to tell them what to do.
Right.
Whereas in the realm of fashion and in the realm of fine art nudes, you can play a little bit more of the role of the director. I think in terms of shooting personality photography, you have to play more the role of the psychiatrist or the psychologist, not psychiatrist, I should say, in terms of how you get what you want out of them. So that stems down really to how much you want to come up or down to someone's level to win their trust and confidence to get what you want out of the personality portrait. In terms of shooting nudes or fashion, I like to basically set the stage, set the lighting more or less, set the foundation for what I'm looking for, and then usually let them play or let it become a little bit more spontaneous. Otherwise, it becomes too forced.
Set things up and let them and trust your talent.
Let them kind of unfold in front of the lens.
Right. And back to the point you said about coming up or down to the personality that you're dealing with. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, sometimes I know we're familiar with the idea that you have 2 seconds. Sometimes get the shot of the star and they go on to whatever
very
they got to
easily.
do.
I mean, I think there's several facets in dealing with personality photography that have come into key play when you're doing that sort of work. And one is to make sure that they understand that you know what you're doing, because celebrities are probably the most paranoid people on the planet. They're very comfortable playing a character other than themselves on the screen, but when it comes time to figure out who they are, they're a little bit more neurotic. And so consequently, if you go in there and go, well, what do you think? Do you like this? They're going to be nervous. You're going to say, I like this picture, but you need to cant your head a little bit this way. So to answer your question more clearly, I always would share in the old days a Polaroid with the person prior to shooting the pictures. Today, I'll show them the digital capture, and I will express to them, this is close to what I want, but I think it could be better if we did this. And so I try to involve the talent as much as possible in what I'm doing.
On your book, you start to talk about the editing process, and my feeling is that most people are their own worst editors. How active are you when it comes to choosing final images, and do you bounce your thoughts off other people that you trust?
Yeah, I think I'm an extremely good editor, but probably most photographers think so. I've worked very closely on many of my books. Actually, since my very first book, I've published 11 books. This will be the 12th. I work with someone that knows me very well. I would say where I get into trouble is not in choosing the right images. I think I'm pretty good with picking the right images, and I've never wanted to ever have anybody else really edit my pictures. I've never let anybody edit my pictures, to be honest. Obviously, if a session is a purchase session from a studio or whatever, and they get all the art, different story.
Sure.
But I always pick my specific pictures I have from day one, and will never let somebody else do that part of the thing. I'm always open to listening to suggestions, and if they can prove me wrong, which sometimes they certainly do, I'm cool about it. Where I probably falter the most is sometimes in the final choice of the final images where I've got too many, or I want to include this because this guy's my pal or she's my friend. And that's been a challenge on this last book. I can tell you a very funny anecdote about the publisher for the last book, who sadly passed away recently, Hendrik Ternois. When we were editing the pictures, I had about 1,000 images for the latest book.
Can I jump in? This is a career retrospective book, so you're looking back at everything, basically.
Yeah. 160 boxes that were massive,
wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pictures. I had a great line from the publisher, which they would probably kill me for saying, but I thought it was quite classic. He wanted to look at the pictures, and he knew my work a little bit, but he didn't know me so well. And so I humored him by giving him the 1,000 pictures on little digital files to look at. And the next day he came back and says, we're kind of in the business, Greg, of publishing books with pictures of pretty people. I said, interesting. I said, I never really thought of myself as being necessarily a chronicler of pretty people. I never let him off the hook on that line.
And did that, I don't know, influence any of your thoughts when you were going through and making decisions?
Well, it made me a little nervous at the beginning, but they've been fantastic. And I'm a complete and utter control freak. And consequently, it's one of the reasons my degree's in film. Why I went back to shooting stills, because I like that one-on-one communication. I like being in charge of what's happening. And Tenoise has been fantastic in terms of me not having to work with one of their creative directors or them supplying someone. And they've actually offered some fantastic criticism in terms of changes we could make. And let's just say even in some of the sequencing of the book, because it's a 416-page book.
Right.
So.
You were going to say that you're good at selecting the images, but I got the sense that there was going to be a but after that. Was it sequencing or something like that?
Well, we've did a very interesting sequencing in this book. It's quite fun. We've kind of paired pictures together, but making those last edits. I did a shoot last week I'm very close with Robert Wagner and his family. Mm-hmm. We did a family shoot last week, which was going to be a surprise for RJ's 90th birthday, which was yesterday.
Wow.
And I thought, I want to do a portrait of Robert Wagner. It's kind of what we talked about earlier. And I thought, I'd shot RJ for years, always looking, like this handsome devil of a man that he always has been. And I said to RJ, I want a hard-ass picture of you, RJ. I want to do something. And all three of the daughters were like, yes, we want a picture of our dad. Mm-hmm. And we shot this killer portrait. I said, now you can actually go up and play Mafia Dons at night.
Right.
And so we had to put this, getting back to the book, I wanted this picture in the book, and we've already at the 416-page limit, so what do I take out?
Right.
So I ended up taking out 2 pictures of David Bowie because I had 8
Others,
pages of him, so I took out a couple of pages of David so we could get a double truck in of RJ.
There you go. Good for you. And going back to look at photos, were there moments where you had a kind of, well, how do I want to phrase this? But where the photo that was at the time the selected image from the shoot, you found something you thought was better?
Absolutely. 100%. It's a great question you just asked. And revisiting a lot of my work that had a definitive timestamp, that timestamp was no longer valid. And I found pictures that were, let's say, askew. I wouldn't say unflattering. I would say more edgy, that were, offered something that was a moment in between what the initial thought might have been.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I imagine also some of the personalities anyway, they came into their own over this amount of time, and the image that we have of them is maybe different than at the start of their career or something to that effect. And did you want to kind of look at it that way outside of the photo itself and maybe the career or the trajectory of the personality?
Well, I think, at 70 years of age today, I shot a lot of these personalities when they were quite young and earlier on in their career. Mm-hmm. And so the vision that I had of them was sometimes at a point in their career where they were establishing their image, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I actually did a book called In Their Youth, which was a book on a lot of the young talent like Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg. I was coming up at the same time these guys were, so I had a lot of them from the very beginnings of their career and had the fortune to be able to work with them in the early formative years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of wanted to ask a couple questions about some of the celebrities you shot, if you don't mind. And I noticed recently on your Instagram, and we lost him recently, but Kirk Douglas, you shot him more than once. Is that true?
Yeah, I worked with Kirk a lot of times throughout my career. And if you read the post, I guess, what was interesting for me is that I shot Kirk very early on in my career. I shot Kirk, I think, in 1978. He came to my studio, and I was just kind of a up-and-comer at that point, and it was so amazing to shoot such a legendary talent. And he was humble and genuine and easy to work with. And I photographed him with his wife, Ann, many times and worked many times with his son, knew most of the family. And he was, you go back and you look at that body of work, he was certainly one of the most extraordinary actors of our time and someone that played every role, kind of very much like Bette Davis did,
And getting back to when we were talking about shooting personalities, and does it change a bit if the personality or the celebrity is a friend of yours, or do you interact in a way that might be different? And is it harder in some ways to get to that right moment, that right photo that brings out their personality?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It works in kind of a twofold situation. Most of the people that have become my good friends started out as a photo session.
Client, yeah.
And so in many ways, it's much easier because there's a certain understanding and a certain level of trust. I know, like with someone like, let's say, Warren Beatty, It took me a couple of shoots to realize don't bother going up to Warren's house before about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Make sure you just come up with the longest focal length lens you can find and let's shoot magic hour light. And I think what that does for celebrities, it gives them a sense of reassurance and trust and confidence, and they know they're not going to have to beat around the bush, so to speak, with a green photographer or a young photographer that they don't know to get to where they want to be. And they know that if I'm coming in, not just me, just because of my relationship, but that we'll start on a much higher level and we cut through all the riffraff.
What have you not done that you still want to do at this point in time?
I wanted to do a book on Bridget Bardot really badly in this stage of her life because as a young boy, I always had such a crush on her, in the 50s when she was in these movies that I thought, I guess we thought it was all sexy kind of stuff. And they were really so safe in those days. You look at a movie. I remember the movie was growing up in Kansas. I snuck into the theater. I think I was probably 7 years old to see And God Created Woman, which I think was a Roger Vadim movie. I'm pretty sure. It was a hot movie. And there was no TNA in the movie at all. It was like, she's running around in a tight fitted skirt. And I just thought, and if you look at Bridget Bardot today, she's in close to 90, I would imagine, and she's never had any work done, and she's
all original equipment,
all original gear. I just thought the concept of following her around for a couple of weeks just by myself, and I'm not a photojournalist, mind you. I've done a little bit. That was my major, was photojournalism at KU, but just to have 100% access to her for like 2 weeks. So that's something I really wanted to do.
I'm assuming black and white, right?
Oh, black and white, for sure. Black and white, no lights, all ambient light.
There you go.
Moving around.
And have you ever been starstruck in a shoot or prior to a shoot? Or
Yeah, sure. I mean, before I ever shot David Bowie, I was pretty starstruck. And then later, after you've shot it, and when I shot Brando, I suppose, and Pacino on Scarface and stuff. But basically, I think as it went on, and I'd shot so many of the big stars, I became more starstruck, or I should say probably impressed in front of my lens with people that were the big directors or producers, when I got the Spielbergs or the Lucases or this one or that one.
And what's your talk at Depth of Field about today?
Pretty much my career and my books and,
personal retrospective.
Yeah, more or less.
Right, cool.
Minus half of my retrospective since I can't show any nudes.
Right.
I said to David, well, this will be an interesting talk.
Can you think of one shoot, and it doesn't even have to be a celebrity or who necessarily, it kind of really stands out in terms of what either formed your style or made your career, or something that said to you, from this point I can go forward?
I would say it's a twofold question. In the late 70s, I shot Tom Waits, and
he's wonderful.
You go back in time, and I had 3 days. I shot him for 3 days. I picked him up at the Tropicana Hotel at like 7 or 8 in the morning and dropped him off after midnight for 3 days in a row.
Wow.
He's up at 7 in the morning?
Yeah, he was up. Yeah, I'd pick him up at 7 or 8 in the morning. This is back in the 70s.
And is that
he was living at the Tropicana Hotel in Santa Monica and La Cienega back then?
Different era. Wow.
I shot him for an album cover called Heart Attack and Vine. And we had pretty much just Tom's clothes, and I don't think we even had a makeup artist. I think maybe I had a stylist that brought some clothes, I guess. Yeah, we had a stylist. I don't think we had anybody for hair and makeup, and I had one assistant, and a camera, and I don't think we had much. We shot a little bit in the studio and a little portable flash, but I remember like for the third day, I started taking the light off the center of camera, and I realized I shot him in front of a tattoo parlor, and that was one of my shots. I went, wow, I really like this picture. The kind of drag the shutter. Yeah. And the third day, it was a funny story. The art director loved the pictures, but he said, "Oh, we really love these pictures. Could you get him in a tuxedo?" And I said, "He's not going to put a tuxedo on." So, of course, I asked Tom, but he says, the only way I'd wear a fucking tuxedo, I'd probably get shot. So we had a girl, dressed her up sexy, put her on a staircase, covered him in blood with a gun in his hand. So
there you go.
So that was one of the shoots that I would say kind of established my style in terms of taking the light off camera. The shoots that kind of got me on my way with the movie poster for Tootsie, working with Streisand on a little movie, working with David Bowie, but getting the big names in the portfolio is what it took. It didn't mean that my pictures were any better, but it just, the names by guilt by association helped launch my career. Yeah.
And quick follow-up, because you mentioned, the stylist. Do you tend to work with a lot of the same folks? Always.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you establish a look that becomes inherent as a stamp and Greg Gorman photo, Bruce Weber, Herb Ritz, I mean, I think we all have a team that are largely responsible for our imagery.
That's great. Oh, interesting.
You have a new book coming out real soon, a retrospective book. How many pictures are in this? 1,000?
No, there were 1,000 pictures to choose from. There's actually, I'm trying to think, in the book, there's roughly 360, 370.
And how hard was it to narrow down, to kill 2/3 of the pictures?
Well, it was a 3.5-year process. It was a year of editing at the beginning, and then I took about a year off just thinking about it. Didn't do much. And then on the beginning of the third year, the last year and a half, it's been hardcore. And then everything had to be scanned because it was all film, mostly film, some digital. And some of them had to be retouched. Not so much retouching as cleaning up the negatives and stuff. And then the last, well, really almost close to a year of the editing. It's just in terms of getting the book put together and designed and things moved around and getting the people to write the articles for the book so you have some sense of credibility beyond your own imagination. So
and in that period of time, especially in the year in between, did you think a lot to say and really say, you know what, I'm going to go in a different direction? I mean, of the
very
original,
much so. Yeah, very much. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, it became, and I don't want to say that it became kind of an egotistical battle, but it was in some ways because we decided in this book that it really should be. I mean, I was very blessed to have a career where I shot a lot of heavy hitters, and so we had a lot of cool pictures, but they weren't as heavy a hitters. So we went pretty much for the heavy hitters with a few. Pictures we threw in there to say I still hadn't lost my touch. But, it's one of those things you kind of find a balance. I wanted some of the newest young actors to show that I was still somewhat active.
Still alive.
Still alive and kicking. And but still wanted the Bob Hopes and the George Burns and the Alfred Hitchcocks and the Orson Welles that people go, wow, you were alive during that period? Yeah, I was. So,
Incredible. Wow. Look forward to that book. And the name is of the book or the play name?
It's called It's Not About Me, but of course John Waters says in the epilogue, it's all about you, Greg.
He's like, come on. That's great.
And the book's going to be out when?
I think late summer, hopefully. We're going to
looking forward to seeing it. It sounds like it's going to be a great, great book.
I'm really excited. It's the most time I've ever put into a book after 12 books. I mean, I've been hands-on and been on press for every book. So this is a big...
Congratulations. That's great.
That's a biggie. That is a biggie. Greg Gorman, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
My name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of Jason and John, bye-bye.